This hearing will come to order. Good morning. I'd like to welcome Admiral Peter Neffenger. Appreciate your willingness to serve. The hearing is obviously called to consider your nomination for the position as the next administrator of the Transportation Security Administration. We held a pretty interesting hearing yesterday, and I think you come into this position understanding that we've got some significant challenges ahead of you, and we're obviously looking forward to the hearing today to appreciate your thoughtful testimony, and we'll be looking forward to your oral testimony and answers to our questions. I think I'll hold off on further comments until we get in the question phase. The hearing today will also consider the nomination of David S. Shapira to be Governor of the United States Postal Service, another agency that's going to require some out-of-the-box thinking. Another agency that's got significant problems. So I just want to thank both nominees for your willingness to serve, and again your willingness to appear here today. And with that, I'll turn it over to our ranking member. Before I begin my round of questions, it's also the tradition this committee to ask all nominees a series of 3 questions. So I'll start with those. Is there anything you are aware of in your background that might present a conflict of interest with the duties of the office to which you have been nominated?
No, sir.
Do you know of anything, personal or otherwise, that would in any way prevent you from fully and honorably discharging the responsibilities of the office to which you have been nominated?
No, sir.
Do you agree without reservation to comply with any request or summons to appear and testify before any duly constituted committee of Congress if you are confirmed?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Admiral, the hearing we had yesterday I thought was pretty revealing, and I think one of the things both in my preparation for the hearing and during the hearing that was pretty stark is the dual goal, the dual mission of TSA. And on the one hand, you have the need for efficiency, that we move passengers through the security check zone so that nobody misses their flight, so nobody's inconvenienced, that the public doesn't get impatient. On the other hand, we're looking for 100% security. Can you just speak to the conflicting nature of those 2 goals and how you would, how you evaluate it, where you place priority?
Well, thank you, Senator. Yeah, I'd be happy to speak to that. The priority is always the mission, from my perspective. I think in terms of my career in the Coast Guard, I've never lost sight of the fact that it's about the safety and the security of the people using the maritime transportation system and the safety and security of the system itself. That said, you still need to move goods and services through those systems. The aviation system is no different, and it's critical that you move people through that system effectively and efficiently. It is always a balancing act between getting those right, but I think if you focus on security, if you're transparent with the need for that security, by definition, a security system creates inefficiencies. We know that. The port environment was a good example of that. Before 9/11, most of the ports of the United States were wide open. And they were wide open for a reason, because you needed to move a lot of stuff in and out of those ports, whether they be containers or bulk cargoes or the like. And there's a lot of access points to the port because you wanted to be able to get trucks and rail and other services in and out as necessary to move that. After 9/11, when we started looking at some of the first attempts to secure the maritime port environment, it was a real challenge to figure out how you do that without clogging up the system. I think the way you do that is you work very closely with your private sector partners. Believe it or not, they have a lot of good ideas out there, and I think that we can benefit from their ideas. I think it's no different in the aviation sector. So as you look at, and there may be some need to introduce a few inefficiencies in order to address some of these recent findings of the Inspector General. In the process of doing that, you have to do that very carefully with the airports, the people who are running the major airlines, the people who operate the airport environment, as well as the traveling public, to explain why, as you're looking for those factors that mitigate. And then in the long term, you have to think about what the security system looks like in the future. I know you talk about out-of-the-box thinking. Well, it's going to take out-of-the-box thinking to think about what would the security system look like if we designed it for tomorrow versus the one we have today. And I think that it will always be a balance between those 2, but I don't think it's an impossible task. I just think it's a very difficult task.
Were you surprised by the revelation of the Inspector General's report that said that there's a 95% failure rate to detect metal weapons and and fake explosives. Did that surprise you?
Yes, sir, it did, and it disturbs me, and and if confirmed, it is the immediate priority is to address those findings, to close those gaps, so immediately, but then to look systemically at what the issues are that brought that forth in the first place.
But do you acknowledge that reality? I mean, it's not my words, but other people have termed what TSA does as security theater, which let me first say that there is some deterrent effect and positive effect for those checkpoints for that theater, but do you acknowledge the fact that it's simply not working?
Well, if I can take a step back from that and talk first in terms of how I view a security system, and it really is a system of security. So if I think about entering into that system, so if I want, from the moment I put my name into a reservation system, I want to know that I'm being looked at in some way. So I hope that some of that is behind the scenes. I want my name to be scrutinized, and I want it to be bounced against all the right databases. And I want to ensure that the people who are doing that have access to the intelligence that they need and the databases that they need. I know that that's been some questions that have been raised. Secondly, I want that to be continuous as I'm moving through the system. And from the time I put my name in that system to the time I exit my destination airport on the other end, I want to be looked at. So I want things happening behind the scenes. Secondly, when I get to the airport, and I want some other things to be happening as well, and there are other ways that you can scrutinize an individual. I want to know as much as I can about the travelers moving through. So I'm a big fan of known traveler programs. I'm a big fan of trusted traveler programs. I'm a member of Global Entry myself. I did that for a good reason. So that partly to move myself through the system, but to participate in the system in the way that I thought the system needed me to. Following that, when I get to the airport, I'd like to know that there are a number of things that might happen. So if I'm a bad guy and I'm trying to make my way through the system, I don't want to see a path through. Or I want every path I take, I want to be unpredictable on the other end. So I like the idea of layers in the system, but I want to be sure that those layers are effective. So as I look at what TSA is doing, and they have layers that have been described to me, whether they be behavioral detection officers or bomb sniffing dogs or other methods that they use, I would like to understand what's the effectiveness behind that. How do we ensure that those are being effective, and then how do they overlap with one another? So if you can devise a system that has a number of layers that overlap in such a way that you close to the maximum extent possible the gaps that exist in that, and that you evolve that system over time, because you still have to keep in mind what the threat is. So you're always looking at the threat. You're plugged into the intelligence community. You understand how that threat's evolving. Read Inspire magazine. Look at the things that are being recommended by those who would do harm to the system, and then go back immediately and question whether your layers are effective. So although disturbing and of great concern, the IG's findings are exactly what you need to find out to determine whether your system is effective.
You know, another vulnerability are really the employees of the airports and the airlines that are working behind the scenes and their security clearances. Again, another IG report showing that we're not necessarily matching up everybody to all the potential watch lists. Is that something you'll make a commitment to make sure that the TSA enters into the interagency agreement so that every possible watch list is utilized for those checks?
Yes, sir. I think that's an imperative. And you know, I'm in the Coast Guard. We're a full member of the intelligence community. I've been working within the intelligence community for quite a few years now. As we know, one of the findings of the 9/11 Commission was the failure of intelligence community to link itself together and to provide information to the people who need it. So it's absolutely imperative that TSA has information to those same databases and to all the information that's potentially available out there. So I would absolutely commit to that, sir.
Okay, thank you. Senator Carper. Solved a lot of problems. The first step in solving a problem is fully admitting it, that you have the problem, then properly defining it. And Admiral, I just have to say, I feel safe flying as well, but only because of the odds. You know, 25,000 flights, what are the odds? So, I mean, I think what the line of questioning Senator Sass was undertaking there is exactly right. And we have to admit the problem. We have to properly define it. Senator Camp, I think we've pretty well covered most of the issues. I know our ranking member has another question or two. I mean, I will just make the statement, though. Regardless of the fact that we haven't had additional airplanes used as a weapon. I would first say that's because we did take a look at the priority solutions and we hardened the cockpit doors. You know, again, very cost effective, but also very effective from the standpoint of security. I do believe the TSA has been in somewhat of a state of denial that what processes, procedures, equipment we have in place, again, it'll catch the water bottles. It'll catch my little Boy Scout pocket knife that I was given and didn't realize I had it in my briefcase. We'll do that, but for determined people that want to defeat that system, I think the IG's report is pretty telling. So it is a matter of recognizing reality and meaning we have those problems. I guess until the ranking member comes back, I will ask, in testimony yesterday, one of the whistleblowers, Ms. Roaring, claimed that the morale, we're talking about the morale issue, but that there's a feeling of fear and mistrust within the TSA. And Senator Ayotte talked about retaliation, which by the way, we're going to have a hearing tomorrow on whistleblowers and the kind of retaliation they have faced. It is disturbing across the government how prevalent that really is. And apparently there's that kind of problem within the TSA as well. So I guess I'm just asking, you have a significant management challenge, low morale if it's true, and I want to ask your opinion. Do you believe there really is? Is that possible that there really is a prevalent feeling of fear and mistrust? But just from a standpoint of the tedious nature of the task, it's just prone to complacency. We're human beings. How do you manage that? How do you rotate shifts? I mean, how do you provide incentives to keep people alert? But really speak to the fear and mistrust statement of our witness from yesterday.
I hope that it's not a pervasive fear and mistrust. But I will tell you that I start from the premise of trusting my organization. I want the people who work for the organization to feel free to bring problems to the organization. That's where you learn the most about what you're doing. I will commit to you that I will. This is one of the most important things for me. It speaks right to the fundamentals of morale. If I work for an organization that I don't trust and that I'm afraid is going to take action against me if I bring problems to light, then that's a real problem. That's a real morale killer. So you have to address that right up front. So what I will commit to you is that that's not the way I do business. It's not acceptable in any of the people with whom I'm working, nor the people who report to me. And I'll take a hard look at the current climate in the TSA.
And Admiral Neffenger, I just have to commend the President and the Secretary for finding such a quality individual as yourself, somebody who's, I think, very well qualified, very well suited for this position, this enormous challenge. And so I certainly want to, tell you and voice my appreciation for your past service, for your willingness to serve. And I'll certainly make the commitment, I think, of this committee and for myself. A number of us have already voted for your confirmation out of the Commerce Committee. We will try and move this confirmation as quickly through this committee as well as through the Senate so you get on the job. But again, we're just so thankful for your willingness to serve, and the further commitment too is to have this committee here to have your back, to do everything we can. We'll commit ourselves to helping you succeed in your mission of keeping this nation safe. So thank you again, and we look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We can seat Mr. Shapira now. We can move on to the second part of our hearing here. Mr. David Shapira has been nominated to be the governor for the United States Postal Service. Mr. Shapira is the chairman of the board of directors of Giant Eagle. Under his leadership, Giant Eagle saw huge growth, expanding from the Pittsburgh area to Ohio, Indiana, West Virginia, and Maryland. By comparison, the United States Postal Service continues to see huge losses and decreasing volume, ending fiscal year 2014 with a net loss of $5.5 billion. The United States Postal Service needs smart, creative solutions to counter the loss in revenue created by changing consumer behavior. The ability to expand and adapt to a customer preference that Giant Eagle has shown is something that the Postal Service vitally needs. Mr. Shapiro, welcome. We look forward to your testimony. We have Senator Bob Casey from Pennsylvania here that'd like to say a few words prior to Mr. Shapira's testimony. Appreciate those words of support. I know Senator Toomey also wanted to come here, and I'm not sure if he'll make it. If he does, we'll certainly offer him that opportunity. If not, I'd ask unanimous consent that his statement of support be entered into the record.
I will not object if Mr. Case will repeat one time those words inscribed in Harrisburg. What was it, all public service?
Is a trust given in faith and accepted in honor.
I do not object, thank you.
I wish they were my words, but they're inscribed on a building in Harrisburg.
Those are great words.
Again, thank you, Senator Casey. Mr. Shapira, it is the tradition of this committee to swear witnesses in, so if you'll please raise your right hand. You swear the testimony you will give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Thank you very much. I could read your introduction, but we've already read it before, so we'll just listen to your testimony.
Thank you very much.
Let me start with, is there anything you are aware of in your background that might present a conflict of interest with the duties of the office to which you've been nominated?
No, and if anything should arise, I would recuse myself from any possible decisions about that.
Okay, thank you. Do you know of anything, personal or otherwise, that would in any way prevent you from fully and honorably discharging the responsibilities of the office to which you've been nominated?
No.
Do you agree without reservation to comply with any request or summons to appear and testify before any duly constituted committee of Congress if you are confirmed?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Shapira, I'm obviously intrigued by your business background. I started my business in 1979. You started a year later, and you just did a whole lot better than I did. So obviously you've got some real talents. You talked about new opportunities for the post office. Can you tell me that your concern, or whether you're concerned or not concerned, about the postal system competing with the private sector, and how you'd try and set up guidelines if you have concerns?
Let me answer that question with a little bit of background. As I was getting prepared for this hearing, I realized that during my career at Giant Eagle, we faced a situation which I think is we faced then and continue to face, actually, a situation which is very similar to what the post office does, and that is the rise of new competitors and new technologies which threaten various parts of our business. In the Giant Eagle case, something that most people wouldn't think about, but there's been an enormous lifestyle shift from eating at home to eating out. And in the supermarket business, we serve food to eat at home. So every meal that switches from the home to a restaurant takes business away from us. And so the way we adapted to that was to continue to do what we did, but also to begin to diversify what we sold. And as I was saying at the staff hearing yesterday, or Monday, we started going into new businesses, but within our stores, so that not only did the new business bring in revenue, but the fact that we had the new business reinforced the old business. I mean, some examples of that are getting into business like pharmacy. When I started in the supermarket business, there really was no such thing as pharmacies and supermarkets. And today, well, Giant Eagle in particular, but really all good supermarkets have very successful pharmacies. Second example of that is gasoline, where whoever would have imagined that you get your gas at the same place you get your groceries. I think the post office has the same kind of problem. It's got a severe technological threat and competitive threat to its best product, which is first-class mail. I think the way to defend that is to continuously try to improve first-class mail, but also to develop other products which can bring in revenue and hopefully reinforce the use of first-class mail at the same time. And actually, as I look at what the post office has been doing, it actually has been doing those things. So I don't think it needs a radical change. I think it needs an emphasis on continuing to change its format over time. In terms of competing with private businesses, or at least non-governmental businesses, I guess is the right word, which I think is the essence of your question. It's a very interesting question. Post office has a mission, needs to carry out the mission. Its competitors have a different mission. That gives them certain advantages and certain disadvantages. And clearly the post office competes against them as they compete against the post office. And frankly, I think competition is a good thing. So I am in favor of seeing new products and being aggressive about building the business model.
Okay. Having been in the business world, I imagine you've done a lot of strategic planning. I certainly have, and found great value in business called a SWOT analysis. People aren't really familiar with that here in Washington, D.C. I'm pretty sure you are. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Can you just kind of go through, in your mind, a quick SWOT analysis of the postal system? What are its, let's start with strengths. What are the primary strengths of the Postal Service?
Well, the primary strengths are the system and the employees and the history. The post office has a system which calls on every single address every day. That's an enormous strength. A second strength is brand equity. Everyone understands the post office. Everyone understands how to mail a letter, how you go about getting a stamp, putting it on. So there's in this case, brand equity is sort of an institutional memory, not only of the post office, but of the whole population of the country. The opportunities, well, the weaknesses are several things. One is I think the post office is constrained from operating as efficiently as it might by law. So an example of that is the necessity to pre-fund the retiree health benefits, which is something that I'm not aware of any other company or institution that does. And a second weakness is it's in some ways constrained from introducing new products. I mean, my understanding is that the law says that the post office can't introduce a new product that doesn't use the post box, the mailbox. In a days like today where technology is changing so quickly, the inability to adapt to changing technology is a big weakness. And of course, it's a huge threat. I mean, the threat of the internet in terms of the first-class mail, or even actually second-class and bulk mail, is enormous. And I know as a company like Giant Eagle, we're trying to move as fast as we can to sending out our communications with the public over the internet because it's so much cheaper. Now, it's not so easy to do, which is a big strength of the post office. So while it's nice to dream about it, you can't just carry it off. So I'm sure I'm leaving some out, but those are the strengths and weaknesses. The threat is, I think, a number of things. Clearly, technology is an enormous threat. It's a threat to any kind of business at any time. Sort of one reason I'm happy I'm retired these days is because technology is changing so fast. It's very hard to keep up with. And I think the other threat is the constraints that are put on by law and by the political system. The opportunities are enormous. The need to get information from one place to another is only going to grow. We are an increasingly interconnected world, and the question is, how can the post office adapt to the changes in the need to accomplish that task. My experience says that whenever there is disruption like there is today, that it's an enormous threat and it's also an enormous opportunity. And the question is, can the post office figure out how to take advantage of that?
Okay. Thank you. Have you really studied the financial situation of the post office? I mean, you're pretty well versed in that?
When you use the word really studied, I would say no, but I certainly
Casually studied?
well, more than casually.
Okay.
I did prepare for this, and so I would say I'm reasonably familiar with it.
So I'm an accountant with a business background. I find it rather confusing. Did you find what preparation you had for this or what you've looked at as relatively confusing, or do you think it's pretty straightforward?
Both. But, when you look at the pre-funding requirement of the retirement health benefits, that it seems to me to be very straightforward. And in fact, it's, what essentially goes on is we put a debit against our earnings for the amount we put put it in our debit balance, and then we don't pay.
Right.
So it's like a joke. And
So it's a debt that is owed to the federal government. So it's really not pre-funded. It's pre-funded only the extent that now you've got a liability of the post office, to the federal government. And it's just one of the liabilities.
It's just one of the liabilities, right there. There's pension liabilities. I mean, there's all kinds of liabilities, but the pre-funding of the retirement benefits and the connection of it to whether the employees have to use Medicare seems to me that should be an obvious and very easy fix. And in looking at the financial statement, the pre-funding is just very slightly smaller than the loss, the total loss of the system. So if the pre-funding were eliminated, we wouldn't be losing money. Well, we'd still be losing money, but not very much. And
But we still have this overhang of about $100 billion of unfunded liability. I mean, I've looked at the balance sheet as best I can reconstruct it in something close to GAAP versus other large bankruptcies, and it looks like a bankrupt entity to me. Do you have a similar type of conclusion?
it's, if you just took a straight up and down look, it seems like we're bankrupt. But the liabilities are actually paid out over many, many years. This is a discounted value of the future liability. So bankruptcy, you can look at a balance sheet and say you're bankruptcy, or you can look at a cash flow statement and say you're bankrupt. In a cash flow statement, I don't believe we're bankrupt. And so the question is, by the way, this is not just a post office question. This is a question for private industry. This is a question for the government. We have these, and it's particularly true in pension liabilities, we have these enormous pension liabilities, and the question is, what are we going to do about it? I don't think we're bankrupt in the sense that I think we still have time to deal with it, but we are bankrupt in the sense that if we don't deal with it, it's clear what the end is going to be. So I think it's a matter of definition of what your terms are, but it's clearly a serious problem, and one that I don't want to say all kinds. I know Giant Eagle faces it. We are members of collective bargaining agreements that have employer joint pension funds, where the funds are horribly underwater. They're on I think it's called the red list. And the question is, what are you going to do about it? We clearly have to face up to the problem.
I think the problem is, and Senator Carper led the way with Senator Tom Coburn trying to come to some political resolution of this, which was not successful. You spoke about all the constraints on the post office, constraints because Congress is trying to, in some way, shape, or form, manage and direct what should be what I think the goal was to make the post office a more autonomous type of organization, but they don't have that autonomy, both operationally or financially. So the American taxpayer, in the end, is still on the hook for this. If you read the Constitution, and I realize the post office is a enumerated power, but it's pretty basic. It says in Article 1, Section 8, to establish post offices and post roads. Do you think it's really a governmental imperative or a constitutional imperative that no matter what, the post office is, we have to maintain a post office, as opposed to we have to perform the constitutional duty of delivering mail? And when the delivery of mail becomes, less and less vital and becomes more and more obsolete because of technology, do we have to come up with different things for the post office to do just to have a post office, even if it's way outside the mission of delivering mail?
Well, that's a wonderful question, and which I'm not sure I know the answer to, but I would say this, there's a big question within your question, which is, what is the definition of delivering the mail? I mean, it doesn't say you have to deliver the mail 2 times a day, 7 times a week. It says you have to deliver the mail. Now, does that mean every day? Does it mean every other day? Does it mean 2 times a day? The function is important. The question of how we define the function is also very important. So it seems to me that to answer your question, you would really have to define what it is we want to maintain. And general terms are not very helpful in doing that, which I think is what causes the controversy.
Well, and I completely agree with you. We need to define what the post office should do. What is the constitutional enumerated power of it? And we really need to ask ourselves a serious question with a bankrupt organization. Do we need to maintain this organization at all costs and have it expand into different areas that just might compete with private sector companies with an implicit taxpayer guarantee, with the taxpayers on the hook for growing liabilities? I mean, I think these are very serious questions the Board of Governors are going to have to be asking themselves, and that Congress we have to ask ourselves the same questions. But again, I appreciate your answers. Senator Carper.
Senator, can I just add that to that? This is the first time I've ever been in a hearing like this. I've seen them on television, but I was fascinated by the questions of the Admiral who was sitting here before me. And it was obvious to me you were all impressed, and I was equally impressed with the kind of answers he gave. One of the things I really liked about the questions and answers was the willingness of the committee to have his back, and at least what appeared to be the desire on both sides, his side and the committee side, to cooperate on helping to solve the problem. My view of the post office is that the post office can't solve these problems itself. It needs you, it needs the Congress. There are laws established here, you have to follow the laws, and there needs to be a cooperative solution to the problem. That is obviously difficult because different people have different political views, but I like to take the attitude that there are no problems that are insoluble if you have good people with common objectives who are trying to solve them. So although it wouldn't, I don't think it would be me who would be interacting with the committee, although maybe it would be. I think the cooperation of this committee and the post office is crucial to solve these problems.
First of all, I completely agree. And again, coming from a manufacturer background, I've solved a lot of problems, and there's a process you go through. And it starts with the definition of the problem. Defining what it is you're trying to accomplish, laying out the reality situation, which is why I was asking your understanding of the financial situation of the post office, which, trust me, in the political environment gets all jumbled up, and people don't really, I don't think, completely understand it. I'm having a hard time, and again, I'm a trained accountant. I've been in business a long time. I've looked at a lot of balance sheets, and it's still confusing to me. I'm getting a little bit better handle on it. But again, it starts with the reality situation. Then, based on that, defining the problem, defining exactly what the achievable goal is, then you start setting strategies. And I think we oftentimes bypass that process, and I think that's what you're hearing in the earlier part of our committee hearing, is we were really trying to get to the, what is the definition of the problem? Are we admitting we are having one? Are we looking at this honestly? And that's what we need to do the post office as well. So again, I really appreciate the fact you've got this business background, highly successful. I think you're going to have the right type of mind. You're answering the questions from my standpoint exactly correctly. What's the definition? But we have to ask the right questions. So again, I appreciate the input, and we absolutely want to cooperate with the Board of Governors and the Postmaster General. This is a big problem, and it has not been fixed. And I have real questions whether or not we can resolve this through a political process, because we haven't been able to do that in the past. But again, I know Senator Carper is highly dedicated to this. He's done a lot of work on it, and I've certainly supported his efforts in the past and want to support his efforts in the future. Mr. Shapira, I'll tell you one thing right off the bat is the solutions for the Postal Service and for the fiscal situation of this country will not be easy. So I just want to thank you for, again, coming here, for your testimony, your willingness to serve. I want to thank you for being an example of a great American. Someone who is serving your community, your state, your nation by doing what Americans do, aspiring, building something successfully, obviously with some adversity. Unfortunately, in today's society, we too often demonize and demagogue people that are trying hard, building businesses, creating great jobs. We need to celebrate that success, and I celebrate it with you, and I appreciate your willingness to serve in this capacity too, and I thank your wife for being by your side here in this service. So again, look forward to moving this nomination through as quickly as possible so that we can get the Board of Governors operating under regular order. The nominees have filed responses to biographical and financial questionnaires, answered pre-hearing questions submitted by the committee, and had their financial statements reviewed by the Office of Government Ethics. Without objection, this information, together with my written opening statement, will be made part of the hearing record, with the exception of the financial data which are on file and available for public inspection in the committee offices. This hearing record will remain open until noon tomorrow, June 11th at 12 p.m. for the submission of statements and questions for the record. This hearing is adjourned.